Hey guys, so today's lesson is going to be on chemical equations. Be sure if you have any questions throughout this slide, just be sure to reach out to your teacher on Google Hangouts or email them as well, just in case you need something to be clarified a bit more. So our learning intention, we're going to analyze and interpret data from chemical labs to determine if a chemical reaction has occurred. Yesterday, you guys did a glow stick lab and you looked at changes such as did it give off heat? Did it give off light? Those were signs of a chemical change. Today, we're also going to look at chemical reactions, but we're going to look at the chemical formulas that go with those reactions. Our do now, this should be completed in the first 10 minutes. So if you have not completed the do now yet, be sure to go to this IXL. Our success criteria, we're going to read a chemical formula and find out how many atoms are in it. We're going to write a chemical equation in words or with chemical formulas. And then we will identify reactants and products. Before we go into that, it's important that we are accurately identifying what a chemical reaction is. So we have to know those signs of a chemical change. And so go ahead and be sure to correct this. This sheet was given to you a couple class periods ago. This is the answer sheet for it. So go into Google Classroom to find this answer key. And just be sure to double check your answers to make sure that you're correctly identifying chemical and physical changes. And this is another reminder on how to read a chemical formula. So today we will see a lot of chemical formulas and we need to properly read them. And so if you have your periodic table in front of you, it's important to correctly identify the elements. For example, this is a capital C. So this will represent carbon, and this is a capital H, and this will represent hydrogen. You also need to be able to properly count the atoms. So here's a subscript 4. This subscript tells us how many hydrogen atoms there are. So there are 4 hydrogen atoms. But if you look here between carbon and hydrogen, you don't see a number. And that means that there is 1 carbon atom. If you do not see a subscript, it is 1. Go ahead and take out your science notebooks. We're going to set up for our activity today, what we're going to do. So you need to make sure that you record this data table in your notebook. Notice that there are 2 slides with data tables, so you'll need enough space on your notebook. Pause the video now and come back and press play when you're done recording these tables. All right, so now that these tables are recorded in your notebook, you need to find the state of matter at room temperature for each of these molecules and look for the chemical formula online. When you're done completing that, come back to this and press play again. So part 2, how do I read and write chemical equations? The chemical equations you just wrote in your notebook, you had many of the popular molecules that we'll go over. So for example, you had water, sodium chloride. These are compounds and molecules that we have talked about extensively. And so we need to be sure that we can read these chemical formulas properly. I'm going to bring your attention to this picture and look at this black arrow. This arrow is important. It tells us that something's being produced. And so to the left of this arrow, you'll see 2 red circles that are joined together. These are 2 atoms joined together. You will also see these 2 white circles joined together. That's representing 2 atoms chemically joined together. Afterwards, look at how it's different. So you have the molecules on the left, but they have been rearranged to form different molecules on the right. This is a chemical reaction. A chemical reaction happens when the atoms are rearranged to form new substances. The molecules on the left are not the same molecules that are on the right. So go ahead in your notebook now. There's a pencil, and you're going to record these notes, the definition for reactants and then the definition for products. All right, so now we're going to use these 2 words extensively, reactants and products. In chemical equations, the reactants always appear to the left of the arrow and products appear to the right. Copy these 2 chemical equations down, number 1 and 2. The first one is a word equation. Hydrogen plus oxygen, there's an arrow, produces water. Number 2 is a chemical formula. H2 plus O2. There's an arrow, and it produces H2O. Circle hydrogen and oxygen here, and label this as a reactant or as the product. Just put an R at top or a P at the top. Then circle water and do the same thing. Label this as the reactant or label this as a product. Remember to pay attention to the arrow. And number 2, I want you to do the same thing. Identify the reactants and then identify the products. All right, so that part, easy, you got it. So let's go and look at cellular respiration. That's what this picture represents. So your body cells, they use the oxygen you breathe to get energy from the food that you eat. So this is called cellular respiration. And during cellular respiration, the cell uses oxygen to break down sugar, which creates the energy you need. So let's look at this chemical equation. We have food here, and then we have oxygen, the arrow, and then we have carbon dioxide, water, energy that can be used by living things. Take this chemical equation and copy it in your notebook. You may ask me, do you have to copy the pictures, the images? Do I have to copy all of it? The pictures will take you a long time, but I do think it's important for you to copy the words and the formula down. So don't just write oxygen, but also put O2 as well. Put the arrow and then copy the rest. And then once again, circle the reactants and then circle the products. Now that you have that down, you're going to get a bit of practice in. So if this is output 1 in your notebook, this should go on a separate page from where your notes were. You're going to look at this chemical formula here. Watch the video on the right. The video on the right will give you more context to the equation. Identify the reactants in the equation, identify the products. And then see, if you were present during this reaction, think about if you were there during the video, what could be one observation you can make to conclude a chemical reaction has occurred? So think back to your glow stick lab where we also looked at signs of a chemical reaction. You're doing the same thing here for part C. What would be some signs if you were there that would tell you a chemical reaction was occurring? And here's the final output. This takes it one step further with challenging you. So the first part of this one, you're going to write the chemical word equations for the following reactions. Let's look at A together. Zinc and hydrochloric acid are added together. A bubbling reaction creates hydrogen gas and zinc chloride. So let's think about this as a math equation in which words usually tell us that we should add something together. So where it says zinc and hydrochloric acid, with the and sign, that means plus, they're together. So if you take zinc and you add hydrochloric acid, zinc plus hydrochloric acid, what does that produce? So the second sentence tells us, it says a bubbling reaction creates hydrogen gas and zinc chloride. So creates, that is a strong sign of it's producing, it's turning into. And so we want to put our arrow there and then put hydrogen and zinc chloride, hydrogen gas and zinc chloride. You're writing this out as a word equation. So I should see the words hydrogen gas on your paper. I should see zinc chloride. But for this and here, I should see a plus sign. Go ahead and practice the same thing with B and C. You may need to collaborate with a friend or check in with your teacher, and you're highly encouraged to do that for this output because it's taking it just a little bit further. So if you want to double check your chemical equation, feel free to collaborate at this step. And then the last output, using the word equations that you wrote in number 1, identify the reactants and products for each reaction. So go back to 1A, B, and C, and circle those reactants and circle those products as well. You're then gonna snap a photo of your product, your output, and you're gonna submit it in Unit 4 folder classwork. You should see an assignment there that allows you to submit a picture of your notes from today. All right. So if you want to do reinforcement for learning, check out some of these cool websites as well. You can also take your learning a step further if you want to go into balancing equations. If you are at that level and you want to start completing that, you can practice with the fat simulation. You can also look at this YouTube video. And then finally, we hope to see you at the end of class because we're going to do a Kahoot review game with the entire class through Zoom. So be sure to join in, show us your knowledge, show us what you know by joining that Kahoot game at the end. Any questions? Reach out to me or Miss Soares through Google Classroom, guys.